Well, good evening, members, officers, and members of the public. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and live-streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, and I welcome viewers joining us online out there. Can I request that mobile phones are either set to silent or switched off for the duration of the meeting? I'd like to remind members of the procedure for tonight's agenda. Should members wish to amend, remove or add additional recommendations or requests as part of our debates, then they need to state the purpose of to state and propose their recommendation at the appropriate time and seek a seconder to then confirm that recommendation. Members will then vote on the additional or amended recommendation as necessary. I'll ask all members to be mindful of this when preparing questions and comments to ensure that each item receives appropriate attention and scrutiny within the available time we have this evening. Should it appear that the meeting will run past the constitutional meeting guillotine time of 9 p.m, then I will ask members to vote on whether to extend the meeting to finish the business on the agenda by a new time that we might set at that point. At that point, I would ask for a proposer and a seconder for an extension to the time of the meeting tonight. We'll now move to the first item on the agenda, apologies received for absence. Raj.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Claire Edwards, Camilla Colson-Patel and Councillor Jonathan Carvetta.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Declarations of interest are for members and officers who might have an interest in a particular item and they need to declare that if it is coming up in the committee debate. I'd like to ask the committee to confirm that they are coming to the meeting with an open mind and have not predetermined any of the items and business before us. I'd like to ask members if they have any declarations to make in respect of items on this agenda. I see shaking heads from that point of view, other than the natural interest we all have in the community. Should the item come up where you do need to declare an interest, please declare it at that particular point, and whether it's disclosable pecuniary interest or a non-registrable interest. All sounds very exciting, doesn't it? But simply that's about keeping ourselves in the correct code of conduct. So item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of October 2025. I'd like to ask members if you're happy to sign the minutes. They appear in our agenda. If we just run through. In fact, I'll look at the members present and ask if there are any items that you wish to change or question in the minutes we had previously. Again, shaking heads there. I'd like to seek a proposer for those minutes, and that's Councillor Bill McHenry and Councillor Ben Jameson. Are we all in agreement with those minutes being a true record of the meeting? Thank you. So we then move on to the more meaty item of tonight's agenda, and that is the General Fund Draft Budget Update Report. Purpose of this report is to receive an update to the proposed budget 26-27 to 29-30, following the publication of the local government statement on the 17th of December 2025. It sets out the revised financial position. We don't have Claire with us this evening, and Mark Dickinson, AD of Finance and Strategy, and Dean Mitchell, AD of Finance and Accountancy, are here to talk us through this particular report. So I'll hand over to Mark and Dean, however you wish to run this double act. Thank you.
I'll take you through the slides if I may, Chair. So what we've tried to do is just condense the reports down so you can clearly see what went to exec in December, which formed the basis of your scrutiny work, and the changes that have then been made to the budget as a result of the provisional settlement coming out. So the timing wasn't the greatest for us. We had the executive meeting on the 16th of December, and the day after we got the provisional local government finance settlement, which has then resulted in us taking a report to the executive, and that report was received by the executive on the 20th of January. So this slide will be one that you'll probably be familiar with, as it's largely based on the scrutiny work that you've undertaken, and it just provides a high-level summary of the draft budget proposals covering the 4-year period 26-27 to 29-30. It sets it out by directorate, and the bottom line on there indicates what the budget gap was based on the modelling we'd undertaken at that point in time. So the gap that we had in 27-28 was 16 million. It increases to 23 million in 28-29, and in 29-30 increases to 35 million. They are cumulative numbers. So the gap that we were looking at over that 4-year period amounted to £35 million. Following the settlement, this table then provides the revised position, and it's better than what had previously been reported. It results in a gap in 27-28 of 13.6 million, in 28-29 it's 19.2, and in 29-30 it's a gap of 27.5 million. So in order to deliver that balanced budget over that medium-term period, savings of 27.5 need to be identified. I should also point out that this also assumes that the council tax will increase by the maximum threshold, which is 4.99% annually over that medium-term period. So this next slide just pulls it all together and shows where we were before the settlement and the changes that have been made to give us the current modelled position. So there's no changes to 26-27. We did receive slightly more funding than we'd modelled, and I'll come on to that and just take you through what those changes are. In terms of the four figures, 16 million, so we had a net change of 2.3 million, so positive change there. Further positive changes in 28-29 and 29-30. So over that 4-year period, we've had a net reduction in the budget gap of £8.3 million to what we were previously modelling. Now, the composition of that is two factors. We've had an increase in grant, but we've also had some net funding changes. So one of the things that we did introduce as a result of the settlement being better than previously envisaged is a contingency budget, and that's something that had come through the work that this committee had done, recognising the importance to have a contingency. So as a result of the settlement being better, we've been able to introduce a contingency budget of 2.4 million. So the increase in funding in 26-27 was 1.195 million, and the net budget changes that we've made amount to the same, resulting in a balanced budget. It's probably fair to say that the settlement that we've had this year, and it's one that's recognised nationally, has probably been the most complex that we've faced for many, many years. They've introduced a number of different situations where they've rolled grants into the spending formula, and they've consolidated a number of grants. And you'll see the bottom line there shows what the net impact is from that. It's a positive impact to us in 26-27, but it's an adverse impact to us in 27-28 and 28-29. But the culmination of all of this results in a net change of 8.3 million, giving us that revised gap of 27.5 million. So there isn't a massive amount of changes to what went to the December executive, but what we felt important was we just took you through those changes so you can see how we've arrived at the numbers that we are currently modelling. There was also changes to the dedicated schools grant. In the same way as we had with the settlement, the reports went to the exec on the 16th and numbers then came out on the 17th. Luckily, we won't be having that problem with the general fund going forward because we've got that multi-year settlement. However, the DSG will still be subject to annual settlements. So the final DSG settlement that was published on the 17th of December showed an increase in funding of 17.7 million to that previously reported. And the impact of that was across the early years block and the high needs block, because they'd previously been based on the 25-26 allocations. So when we sort of dissect that down, there's minor changes between the schools block and the central school services block, but the early years block shows a change of £13 million. 12 million of that results in there now being a full year adjustment to reflect the 15 hours of support for working parent entitlement, where in the 25-26 financial year, that was only in play for 7 months. So it's not really additional money that we're getting, it's recognising the full year impact of government decisions. The main increase in the high needs block primarily relates to the alternative provision, and that amounts to 4 million. So what we've done here is just pulled it together so you can see what the changes were from the December exec to the January exec. There was a small change of 72,000 being the transfer from the schools block to the high needs block, and the main change resulting to the increase in funding of 4.8 million. So the overall change for the DSG is just shy of 4.9 million, and it results in a change in the budgeted deficit position. You'll recall that we were previously budgeting a deficit of 29.6 million. That has now reduced to 24.7. So they are still significant deficits. Our challenges are the same as those councils that have the responsibility for the DSG up and down the country. We are still awaiting the white paper to be issued. We're led to believe that could be within the next month, but then other sources have said that it'll be before Easter. So as soon as we know what that is, then we'll be able to provide some updates around that. So just in terms of next steps, the paper that Chris will be presenting next will give the committee the opportunity to feedback any further comments in addition to those already fed back to the executive. The final settlement is to be announced on the 9th of February, a day before we report to the executive on the 10th of February. So what I envisage happening, if there are any changes, we'll have to do an addendum report, and that then can be presented and considered by the executive at that meeting. The executive at their meeting on the 10th of February will then make a formal recommendation for consideration by council at the meeting on the 19th of February, which is where the council tax resolution will be presented and the council tax will be formally set. So the recommendations for the committee this evening are to note the updated draft general fund budget position for 26-27 and the medium term position for the general fund as outlined in the report, and also Appendix A, which was the full report, and the same position for the dedicated schools grant is to note the updated position for 26-27 as outlined in the report. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of the context, in terms of understanding what's changed between the two executive meetings, and I'm happy to take any questions through the chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. I was equally pleased to go and take our recommendations to the executive in December, and as Mark has said, we were all very much aware that that could change the day after. So, colleagues, any questions? I've got Councillor Helen Harrison.
Thank you, Mark. That was really helpful, but I'm really confused now, because when the announcement came out in December, I thought all the talk was doom and gloom. It was all awful. We'd got way less money than we were expecting to get. Something to do with the sort of needs funding formula, and we were making representations to the department, and it was all to do with unitary councils seem to have done badly, but now it sounds like actually we've done better than we thought. So I'm really confused now. Thank you.
If I may, Chair,
Certainly, Mark.
just in terms of that, when we did the initial modelling back in the summer, and the modelling we did was informed by the consultation, the numbers were looking a lot more favourable than what we've presented to you this evening. So I think one of the key areas, and you're absolutely right, it was on one of the relative needs formulas, and it was the one relating to children's. We feel we've been adversely impacted, largely due to a change in the indices that they've used to calculate that, which has seen a significant shift to the London boroughs and also the likes of Birmingham. And on the analysis that we've done, it feels that those new unitaries haven't done as well as they possibly could have done through the new formula. So whilst it's positive in terms of what we're presenting tonight, in terms of having a reduced budget gap to what was presented to the executive in December, the position would have been a lot more favourable had they carried on using what we believe they consulted on in the summer.
That makes sense. So the change, the disappointment comes from the summer to now, not from December to now. That's fine.
Right.
Yes. I understand that now. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we were all confused, certainly in local government finance, between the changes between one area and another. And of course, an £8 million benefit is 2% of our £400 million budget. And I just to ask the question there, over the years, we've always, on our medium-term financial plan, had a deficit going forward. How do you view us absolving that deficit? What sort of things can the council do to end up with that 27, now not 35, but 27 million in 3 years' time? What sort of mitigations do you see being able to be made? And then I'll capture my colleagues again.
If I may, Chair, I mean, the council's continuously working to identify how services can be delivered more efficiently. We're also looking at how we can generate income. There's a lot of work taking place around transformation. So what we're looking at doing is trying to meet that challenge over the 3-year period. Typically, we've looked at we'll still have to set the budget annually, but what we're trying to do is get the medium term into that financially sustainable position. And that's the work that we'll be undertaking in conjunctions with yourselves over the coming months. It is going to be a challenge. I think we're in a growth area, so the demand on our services grows each year. I don't think the grant is growing at the same trajectory as the demand in population. This isn't going to be a unique situation to us. It's going to be one that's going to be felt up and down the country. But we will be working as part of the management team to address those challenges and working with the executive.
Thank you, Mark. I'm catching Councillor Dennis McLean. There's a question. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from the Chair's question there, the forecasted deficits that we've got, it seems like a sort of fait accompli that that's the way it's going to be. If for some reason we get to the sort of latter stages when we're still £27 million in debt, how do we deal with that? Obviously, apart from putting council tax up, or is there any areas that we've already identified where we can attack these deficits? Thank you, Chair.
I mean, I think the key areas of spend are obviously adults, children's, home to school transport, and that's the work that Scrutiny have looked at in terms of reviewing the budgets. It is certainly going to be a challenge over that 3-year period. What I would also say is the council comes with a strong track record where we've been able to set balanced budgets annually. The budget process really is a 12-month process. It never stops. So we're always looking at ways that we can deliver services differently and more efficiently. What we'll also be looking to do is provide updated positions on the medium term on a quarterly basis through to the exec, which will also come back to scrutiny to review. As you'll appreciate, the modelling that we do is at a point in time based on the intelligence that's available to us. And I think relating back to those three key areas, I think that process in terms of how those budgets were built was shared with yourselves. But we will be working to look at how we can deliver services differently in order to close the gap that we've got.
Thank you, Mark. Colleagues, any other questions or any other recommendations that we wish to put forward? So I've got Councillor Bill McHenry and then Ben Jameson.
Yeah, hi. One question I have is obviously with the social costs, adult and child social services, it's not necessarily a bottomless pit, but I don't see how you can predict in 4 years' time what the cost will be based on historical evidence, because it changes so dramatically. I mean, I know we have one child that costs £860,000 a year to attend school. If a few more cases like that appear, then surely that will blow a big hole in your future's projected costs. So how can you sort of sit here and say 4 years' time, this will be the cost of social care? I understand that. I would not want to be doing your job, frankly.
No, I mean,
I don't know what it appears to be rude, but it's sort of pie in the sky, because you are literally just clutching figures out of the air that you can't, you can say the building will cost X pounds. You can practically guarantee that will be the cost. The salaries will go up X percent per year, but the biggest bulk of the costs for the council is social care. And that's the element that is the most concerning, because you cannot accurately predict that without far more knowledge than I personally have. So I really would not want to be doing your job on that front. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, I mean, in terms of when we put the budget together, we model a number of assumptions. Obviously, when we're looking at social care, the two key assumptions are the level of demand and the price we're paying. The work that we're trying to do at the moment is looking at how we can prevent some of those children coming into care. I think the preventative work also produces better social outcomes. So we're making an investment into that to try to keep children out of care, which ultimately then starts to reduce some of that cost. And I think you've probably heard bits from the Children's Trust previously when they've spoken, and they've generally said that when you've got a good system in place, it generally costs less. And I think a lot of that stems from the work that we need to do around the preventative side, and the council's on that journey now to try to do that. So the numbers do have intelligence behind them based on what we're currently seeing. We do update them regularly based on the monitoring that we do in year to do the extrapolation across the medium term, so it's clear what that gap looks like. But I think the preventative side will be a big part in trying to meet some of the financial challenges that we've got.
Thank you, Bill. Councillor Ben Jameson.
Thank you, Chair. You referenced the demand growing, obviously, for the services because we're a growth area. But also being a growth area means we should get more taxable income. I'm just interested, obviously difficult to say what an average household looks like, but wouldn't an average household be a net contributor to the council tax income or the opposite? I'm just interested in what that would look like.
Through you, Chair, if I may, it's really difficult to say because everybody's circumstances is different. The sort of like pressures on our services come early in life through children's and later in life through older adults. There's a bit in between as well where we've got the 18 to 64 cohort in adults that causes us a pressure. But when we look at the size of our population and the number of children and adults that are actually requiring social care, it's a small proportion of the total population. So the vast majority of people would probably be contributing positively, but those that do need and require our services can also be expensive.
Yeah, by all means, come back.
Thank you. Yes, on the Kettering Town Council, we had a conversation about how it seems that people grow up in Kettering, then move away, work, and then maybe move back later in life. So I suppose you could say it'd be good for the area if we encourage people to stay doing the productive adulthood years, working and building a family and making sure North Northamptonshire, and I know obviously we've got different things, Big 50, all the goals within that, but obviously that then clearly helps our overall budget and pressures.
Chair, Chair, are you happy for me to? I mean, I think it's a really good point, actually. I think it's just referencing back the council's corporate plan and sort of the prosperity element, but also the Big 50 vision for the area around being prosperous. And I think that thing about having a prosperous local area is really, really important for the income of the council, but also to helping to dampen some of those demands, those needs that we've got to fulfil. But it's getting a balance. So I think that's one of the reasons why skills development, attracting employers to the area, and some real opportunities there with growth. But it is a delicate balance, isn't it? Because it will create also other issues in terms of the need for schools and infrastructure and other things. So, but yes, it's certainly beneficial to have an economy that's vibrant and prosperous.
Thank you, Guy Holloway. Councillor Paul Brook.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I just want to try and get my head around something because I struggle with this a little bit. On the business rates, I read some point there's a 6.7% levy on it, is that correct? From the government?
There's a levy on the growth in terms of what we can retain.
On the growth that we can...
So there's what it's called the Business Rates Retention Scheme. So government will give you a baseline, and if you deliver growth over and above that baseline, you keep an element of that growth.
Okay, so I saw a figure that said basically that we used to get 490,000 per million, and we now get 430,000 per million. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that on everything?
No, they used to have a fairly simplistic way of calculating it previously, where it was 1%, a given percentage for the growth that you've delivered. It's now on a tiered system. So
what are we losing by that? How much money are we losing by that?
It's difficult to say at the moment because we don't know what the amount of growth is that we're going to deliver going forward.
Sorry, sorry, just because the way it was explained to me is that we were now getting 430. That's how it seemed when they were talking about it. We're now getting 430 per million as opposed to 490. And if that's the case, that's a big chunk of change. If you work that out, maybe 13 million quid across the whole lot, roughly. If you worked it out, but I may be wrong. Well, that's what I'm asking you. I just want to clarify that.
You're absolutely right. In terms of the growth, we used to pay a levy of 6.1%. So in terms of what you were articulating earlier, you're absolutely right in terms of the levels of growth that we've retained. So under the old system, for £1 million of growth, we would retain £460,000. Under the new system, because it's a tiered system, growth up to 6.5 million, you pay a 10% levy. So even on the first 10%, you are paying a higher levy. The levy rate then increases to 30%. The levy rate after that increases to 45%. So one of the challenges for authorities like ourselves is we've done incredibly well out of the business rates retention scheme because the amount of businesses that we've been able to attract to the locality. When this new system comes into being, we're not going to get any of that growth. They're going to set a new baseline and that's the point from which growth will be measured.
So-
A system that would seem more equitable is where a year drops off and a year adds on. So you're doing it over a rolling period of time. So you do get some of the benefit of that growth. So this was one of the points that we'd made as part of our response to the consultation, in that we feel that we're being disadvantaged from the new levy rates that are being introduced.
Yeah, okay. So but you don't know currently what that means in terms of what we are not going to get.
I couldn't give you I could do it based on £1 million in terms of what we've got, but I don't know what the level of growth will be, because we'll only know that in a year's time when we've delivered on that growth. So, I mean, that's something we can bring back to yourselves to say, this is what we would have paid under the old system and this is what we're paying under the new system. There will be no changes from government's perspective, though, in terms of how that levy rate's calculated.
Right, okay. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Brooke. I just wanted to put in one question, and then I've got Councillor Jameson and Councillor McHenry. Sorry? Sorry? Don't start. I'll continue on that one. Consultation, I just wanted to pick up on that, which you just talked about, and picking up Councillor Brooks' comment. What is that consultation? And I won't possibly ask you what you think the outcome would be, but what is that consultation about?
There was a consultation in the summer, Chair, in terms of trying to look at how the new scheme would be designed. Then, alongside the provisional local government finance settlement, there was a consultation as well. It was somewhat limited in terms of the questions that were being asked, where I think the consultation in the summer was a lot more comprehensive and detailed. The council has responded to both of those, and coming back to Councillor Harrison's point earlier around some of the bits not being quite as good, or we have fed all that back as part of that as well.
Thank you, Mark. Bill, Councillor McHenry.
Yeah, regarding the business rate, surely it's a disincentive to be successful, which I don't believe is how a central government should reward, or you should be punished for doing well. So you're saying the better you do, the more we pay?
But the incentive is the better you do, the more you retain as well.
But they're still taking a large chunk.
We're
talking millions.
They're taking the largest share of it. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So,
but in terms of what we're trying to do for the local economy as well, is deliver on that business growth. And I think in the locality there has been a lot of success of that in recent years. But we will get the benefit of retaining some of that business rate. So it's certainly not a disincentive. The incentive's there. I think there could be some tweaks to the system that could provide a greater incentive.
No, thank you.
Councillor Ben Jameson.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned preventative services, obviously not only trying to help the balance sheet, but also social outcomes. I'm just interested, is there modelling done on like a return on investment of like pound spent per preventative measure equaling this amount saved at all? And do we feel as a council we're being aggressive enough in pursuing the preventative measures to hopefully reduce demand for services?
I mean, when we look at any of the transformation projects or that early help and prevention, there's business cases we'll put together that will demonstrate that we're getting the return on the investment. But I do also feel that the social outcome side is key in this, because what we want to try to do is keep children with their families. And that's something that's really, really, really important.
Thank you, Ben. One of the things that after our last scrutiny, there was media coverage that the council was significantly advantaged. this report is identifying where the money that was being suggested is. Is it right to say that a lot of what was suggested was extra was actually already within our budgets and not actually increasing our levels? That seems to cause people a lot of confusion, and it looked attractive and then it didn't look attractive. Is it easy, and I know a lot of what you've already said is that, just to articulate how that balanced out?
So I think, through you, Chair, I think what you're referring to is the core spending power. So the core spending power is a measure of the overall revenue funding available to local authorities for delivering services. It includes council tax. So I think when we looked at our core spending power, the increase looking back to 24-25 amounts to just shy of £80 million. However, of that includes 56 million of council tax. And clearly that's a local decision in terms of whether the council tax will go up at the rate that the government are modelling. Government are modelling that it's going up by the referendum limit. But what that means is the amount that's coming from government is around 23 million. So significantly less than the 79 million headline. But core spending power is a measurement that they have used for a number of years. It's not something that's new. But I think it can sometimes be slightly misleading as well.
I think that was the case. In a while, I'll bring in Councillor Cheatley just to give us his view on that as finance portfolio holder. Colleagues, are there any recommendations or any resolutions you want to make in relation to this debate? There don't have to be, but I just ask you to ponder on that, on any of the issues that we've just discussed. But I'll bring in Councillor Dennis McLean. I hope I've got that right. No one else seeking to speak? No. Councillor Dennis McLean. Dennis.
Yeah, just going back to when you said that the more we earn, the more money we get to keep. But it seemed to me it'd be like a tax system. The more we earn, the more we pay the government. Whereas you say you're looking forward to the next settlements in a different way of doing it. Would that be like, as if you were investing, it'd be like a pound cost averaging over sort of the next 3 years if they change it?
In terms of the incentives that you get from business rates, that doesn't form part of the numbers that the government have announced. That's in addition to. So we've done some modelling in terms of where we think that growth's going based on the new businesses that we think are coming into the locality. And that's how we've arrived at the numbers we've arrived at. Dean also whispered something in my ear as well, which is a very good point around core spending power. What core spending power doesn't do is take account of changes and increases in demand. It looks at the resources that you've potentially got available, but it doesn't take account of the pressures that we're experiencing as a council.
Yeah, can I just come back on that in the sense that, well, the incumbent government at the moment, they talk about growth. We need to go for growth, but it seems like if we go for growth, they seem to be sort of penalised on it. Thank you, Chair.
If I may, Chair, I think growth is still a good thing. And clearly government's got two priorities around growth. One's housing growth and one's business growth. And the more businesses that we deliver or have in the locality, the more we should be able to retain. Obviously, what's also important is keeping those existing businesses in the locality, because what you don't want to do is bring new businesses in and existing ones move on, because that will have a detrimental impact. And obviously the housing growth side works in terms of, has been alluded to earlier, in terms of a higher council tax yield. But that side of it, when we're looking at the money that we can generate through government funding or through council tax, as Dean mentioned, doesn't take account of that demand pressure. And that's a bit government aren't measuring at the moment. They've come up with the various formulas, and that's why it's going to be really important that this gets updated in 3 years' time, which is one of the commitments they've given us, because the previous system was with us for about 14 years.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, we were, those of us who've been around a while were waiting a long time for a fairer funding formula, and that was irrespective of the government of the day. Councillor McHenry.
Sorry, one question I have is, a lot of construction firms are struggling, a lot of businesses are struggling. What sort of contingencies do you have if a major employer goes under and you lose the rates and we lose the associated other businesses that will struggle and may disappear? Because there's quite a few construction firms, even though there's a big building target by the current government, they are predicting quite a few businesses within that sector will go under.
If we were looking at it purely from what we retain through the business rate system, that would adversely impact on us if businesses ceased to exist and they weren't paying rates on those properties. I mean, there are various reliefs and support that can be provided. But is that factored into the figures that you've calculated? Yeah, it's a potential, because obviously you've got to have a risk factor in all your figures. I mean, what percentage of businesses going under would affect significantly the rates, the business rates you get in? I think when we look at the composition of our business rates base, it's a small number of properties that contribute a significant amount of yield. So it'd be those bigger businesses, and I think in some of those in significant distribution units. What does generally tend to happen, particularly being where we're situated with the transport networks that we've got, if one did face some difficulties, there'd be one looking to moving fairly shortly because of the supply and demand challenges that are in existence around those sort of units.
Thank you, Mark. Just picking up, and I'm not capturing any particular resolutions that colleagues want to put forward, and then I'd like to bring Councillor Cheatley in a moment. But when we talk of, and it probably relates to that as well, when we talk of, for example, social care, our capital programme is attempting to put money in, probably almost linking to Bill's point there. If you could just give a brief outline, we're trying to build places for children that don't then have to be out of county. We're trying to develop our adult social care places, which is the prevention end, and the capital programme, not specifically in this item, but could you just give a little bit of a background there as to how we're trying to stop that demand-led?
Yeah,
reduce it.
You've probably covered a lot of it already, Chair, in terms of using our own assets to deliver those services. And I think by us intervening in that market can enable us to deliver the costs at a lower value. One good example of that is around homelessness. You'll recall a number of years ago there was a lot of the homeless being placed in bed and breakfast accommodation. What we've done as a council is acquire properties to house them. That again produces a better social outcome. But what we're also doing is strengthening our balance sheet, because we're using and acquiring those properties. So rather than money flowing out to external providers, i.e. those bed and breakfast providers, the money's being retained in-house and creating a stronger asset base. What we did a number of years ago was we did borrow for some of that. So the only cost to the council really is the interest. And I think by adopting that sort of delivery model, whereby we can acquire assets and use those assets in service delivery, can reduce in lower costs and better outcomes.
Thank you, Mark. My last point, and then I'd like to bring Councillor Cheatley in for his contribution. 9th of February, any changes? This is where you get your crystal ball out and you look at it with Dean. I know it's an almost impossible question, but what sort of things what might one anticipate there? Is there any way, just one day before our executive committee meets to recommend the budget to full council, do you have any feeling for major or just teetering around the edges?
I think the rumblings are, Chair, that they would be teetering around the edges. I can't say what they'll do or what they won't. Obviously, councils up and down the country have responded back to that consultation. Hopefully government's working through those responses, and if they do feel that there's some issues with the data sets that they've used, that they use revised data sets which may change some of the numbers. What that means for future years, I don't honestly know, because whilst we've made representation over that multi-year settlement, it doesn't mean that years 2 and 3 are going to be fixed in stone. There might be some flexibilities, and if there's some further challenges, they may look to revise some of it. But in any case, one would imagine that the quantum will remain largely as is, and it would be the distribution that would change.
Thank you. It's probably a good point to bring Councillor Graham Cheatley in. Councillor Cheatley is our Executive Member for Finance, so he's not a part of the Scrutiny Committee, but he's come along tonight both to listen first-hand to our debate, and I'd just be very grateful if you could contribute some of your thoughts briefly on the budget. And I guess you're waiting with excitement for the addenda on the 9th overnight, and some sleepless night maybe, the addenda before the 10th. So Councillor Cheatley, thank you.
Indeed, very well put. Just a couple of things. I think some of the questions you've asked tonight have been really, really good, actually. And Councillor Harrison, the very first question you asked, I think the figure is that on the modelling that we first looked at, we are now £38 million adrift of what we thought we were going to get. So that's quite considerable. Yeah. So it's quite considerable. Going back to the core spending power, the truth of the matter is our core spending power is mostly financed or funded by our residents. I think it's 75% of the growth comes from the council tax increases and not new government funding. I think you put it down the other way, but yeah, 75%. And I think the figures are, so for North Northamptonshire, core spending power rises from £1,074 per dwelling to £1,201 per dwelling. So that's an increase of £127 per household. Well, if you look at the national figure for that, the increase nationally is £174. So there's quite a bit of difference there. And if you consider as well our council tax is, I think it's something like £450 lower than the average elsewhere. So that's quite a considerable sort of amount. So the way that the media were describing it as a windfall, the 79.3 million, is in fact not very accurate. I did want to go back to the business rates baseline. And essentially, because the business rates baseline has been reset, so all of that growth that we've had before, we were benefiting from that, and we were keeping a proportion of that growth. But now the business rates is set. We're starting all over again, essentially. Can you correct me if I'm wrong on that? So what now is important, and Mark has alluded to this already, what is important is that we grow. We've really got to put the effort into that growth now, because we will benefit again from the extra growth in business rates. So that really is important. So we've got to encourage growth. So that the business rate rates baseline is now reset. So if we grow, we will keep more of that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And also, for me, the business rates reset of that baseline is the big thing that's really gone against us nationally. Everyone's in the same predicament. And the County Council's network, I read the report there 2 or 3 days ago, and they put it very, very bluntly. I agree with them. That money, for the want of a better way of putting it, has gone to London and other metropolitan areas. And that seemed to be changed from what they were initially going to do, the government were going to do back in June. So the way that we were modelling then, I think, has changed. So we're worse off for it. I think that was really all I was going to say. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has got any questions for me particularly, but yeah, I think they are the main issues for us.
Thank you, Councillor Cheatley, and thank you for coming along this evening and giving us those particular views. No one's caught my eye to ask any further questions. I guess on behalf of the committee, keep lobbying, because that disparity around the country between the London boroughs and other areas, the word fair doesn't seem to come heavily into that, even though it's the term. So thank you very much for your contribution there. So colleagues, we're now moving forward on our agenda. The officer recommendations this evening is that the Corporate Scrutiny Committee note the updated draft general fund budget position as has been pointed out to us for 26-27, and the medium-term position for the general fund as outlined in the report attached at Appendix A to our agenda. And B, note the updated draft dedicated school grant, DSG, budget position for 26-27 as outlined in the report attached as Appendix A. We have no other recommendations or moved from our debate this evening. So thank you, members. I can confirm that members of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee have considered and noted the updated draft general fund budget position and the medium-term position, the updated draft dedicated schools grant budget position for 26-27. So we've noted that. There's no reason particularly for a vote. We don't need a vote on that, do we? No. So we'll now move to the next item, which is agenda item number 5, draft budget final scrutiny. I think this is over to you, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies in advance, members, if this is a little bit repetitious, because I'm going to land some of the points that Mark and others have made over the last 50 minutes or so. But the purpose of this report is to give the opportunity for further final scrutiny of the draft budget. So as members are aware, this committee acted as the budget scrutiny panel and met 5 times during November and December last year, and its remit was to scrutinise the high-risk items contained within the draft budget. Now, the output of those scrutiny sessions, which I think was some 12 hours of scrutiny, resulted in 30 recommendations being made to the executive at its meeting on the 16th of December, all of which were accepted. Now, when the scrutiny was being undertaken in November and December, the budget scrutiny panel was aware that the government had not published its local government settlement at that point in time. So therefore, in its recommendations to the executive in December, it advised that it would undertake further final scrutiny when the outcome of the settlement had been known, hence the report we've just considered. So this point of this meeting this evening, or this session this evening now, is an opportunity to further final scrutiny of the draft budget. So, on the 16th of December, the executive released its draft budget for consultation, and this report contains 3 appendices. Appendix A is the full draft budget, the medium-term financial plan, and capital programme 26 to 2030. That is attached at page 37, going through to page 194. It also attaches as Appendix B the housing revenue account draft budget and medium-term financial plan proposals between pages 195 to 214. And the third attachment is the report of the Budget Scrutiny Panel that was previously considered by the Executive and is brought to this committee just for basic good order. And that is attached at page 215 to 234. So officers' recommendations this evening are set out on page 32, and the committee is recommended to A, consider the draft budget and make any additional and appropriate recommendations for the Executive to consider at its meeting on the 10th of February. The second recommendation is to consider the Housing Revenue Account draft budget and again similarly make any additional and appropriate recommendations for the Exec to consider at its meeting on the 10th of February. And the final recommendation is to receive and formally note the report from the Budget Panel, which is attached at Appendix C. So, Chair, that concludes the overview. Members' questions are invited, and our finance colleagues are here to respond to any questions that may arise.
Thank you, Chris. A significant amount of detail there, but we have our finance colleagues here to answer any questions that may come forward. So, colleagues, we scrutinised 63% of the budget. Those were the three major key risk areas, and we reported those back to the Executive. This is the opportunity to look at those other papers, those other budget areas, and if there are any that you wish to raise or to discuss this evening. So, colleagues, any aspects of what is effectively the other 37% of the budget? Just bringing forward these fees and charges, all the other aspects, leisure, some of the other community services. I appreciate you've seen these reports going through to the Executive, so perhaps that has identified any other scrutiny that you wish to take forward. I'm not seeing anyone to catch my eye on those particular papers. I will just look, and it doesn't have to be over at Mark, any particular issues that you see in those papers that have been presented to Executive, any particular areas that you think we should dwell on. I'm seeing a shaking head, and perhaps that's not. No. Councillor Dennis McLean.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, just going back to the one where you were talking about the homeless situation and us buying properties, because then obviously that takes the cost of putting them in B&Bs. Surely when we buy the property then it doesn't really become an asset because we can't sell it again because we're using it for the B&Bs.
I mean, we have bought it through you, sorry, Chair. We have bought it with that purpose, but there would be nothing if the council decided it wanted to sell it, they could do so. But I think the risk of doing that is if you sold it, you're likely to end up doing what you try to address by having people going back into B&Bs.
Yeah, I understand that totally. I understand the reason for doing it, and that is a good reason. I was just thinking in the sense that if we were buying properties, then we were putting them out to rent to constituents, then it would then be an asset because you'd be getting the rents in for them. But because we're using it for the homeless don't pay to live in there, do they?
You'll get the sorry, through you, Chair, you'll get if they're entitled to benefits, you'll be able to get benefits coming in for that property. I mean, one of the options that we looked at as well and considered is if the homeless situation was to improve and our supply of housing for the homeless was greater than the demand, that there could be options to transfer those at a cost to the housing revenue account.
Yeah, thank you. That's the sort of road I was going down there, to be honest. Yeah. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Dennis. So without any further... Good. We've encouraged some comment. Councillor Helen Harrison.
Sorry, again, this is just a matter of interest, really. If we kept 100% of our business rates, what difference would that make?
A very significant difference. I'd have to I've not got those numbers to hand,
No.
but it would make a significant difference, yes. I think the flip side of that would be where you've got authorities that don't have the ability to generate that amount of business rates would be severely disadvantaged.
We're not worried about that.
But then that's where the government would step in. Yeah. We could be self-sufficient and the government could look after the ones that aren't. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. That would be a nice dream, wouldn't it, to go home with, to retain those business rates. Well, I think in that circumstance, if there are no more questions from committee members, the recommendation for this particular item is that we've considered the budget 25-26, medium-term financial plan and capital programme 26 to 30, and makes any additional appropriate recommendations for the executive to consider at its meeting 10th of February. We don't have any further recommendations for the 10th. We've also considered the housing revenue account draft budget, which are in those papers that we were looking in there in that appendix, and we have no particular questions or comments to refer on to the executive on that. And in essence, we've received and noted the draft report from the Budget Scrutiny Panel, which is attached to Appendix C, and that was the draft report that I took to the executive on the 16th of December. So without further ado, we've noted those particular items and are minded to draw that item to a close. So thank you, colleagues, for your input there. And item agenda number 6, is the corporate scrutiny work plan. We already have had conversation and spoken to the executive that we would like a half-yearly update on the recommendations that we made on December the 16th to see how the executive are approaching those and how they are dealing with those through this next financial year. But I also now would hand over to Raj to look at the Corporate Scrutiny Work Programme 25-26.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see a printout in front of you. It's quite small. Unfortunately, there's no A3 paper, but I'm just going to go through the items for the next meeting. So the next meeting is due to be held on the 17th of February. And at that meeting, we will go through the Quarter 2 Period 6 Finance Report, as well as the KPI Performance and KPI Performance Framework. As always, moving forward, any items that members would like to add to the work plan will be considered by the Scrutiny Management Board, and any items coming from exec that will need to come through corporate scrutiny will be added to the work plan as we move through the new municipal year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Raj. In the rather small print that we have before us, we're just looking there at the forward plan. Raj has already said performance monitoring going throughout into our future meetings. One item that... Oh, sorry. Guy. Oh, sorry. I didn't catch your eye, Guy. By all means.
Chair, that's okay. I don't mind waiting to the opportunity unless you'd like me to go now. I'm happy to go now. It was just an item for consideration, which I've been liaising with colleagues on, was around bringing the annual delivery plan, or the draft annual delivery plan, to the corporate scrutiny with the supporting enabling strategies around workforce, technology, customer experience, consultation, and finance, which is sort of covered separately, but it is one of the enabling strategies. So it was just to sort of throw that into the melting pot for consideration. It would be draft, and it would give corporate scrutiny that opportunity to comment and to help shape. And I think what it would do as well, Chair, is I think it would help to answer some of the questions this evening around that preventative measures, the transformation programme, the budget gap and those type of things. It shows more of the wiring of the organisation, so it will give members that opportunity to understand more, but also to contribute to that. So it's just a thought there, Chair. That's what we were, when I was talking with colleagues, that's what we were looking at. I do apologise. I thought I'd got that onto the forward work plan, but I realise there's a process to go through, so apologies.
Absolutely no need to apology, because as you spoke, all colleagues were nodding madly that it was some of the questions we had earlier, and that delivery plan would be extremely useful for us to move forward onto the work plan. One of the things that we'd been talking and with colleague Chris Stevenson was perhaps, and I seek and look into the eyes of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, that we maybe have an informal session which talks about the different budget heads, the different aspects of the budget that we may well or will go and scrutinise during the next year. And I'm just looking for a general nodding of heads or agreement or disagreement that we maybe have that informal meeting. We know the three key areas that Mark and Dean and Graham have talked about, but the other areas of the council's work, perhaps to do that. So I think, Raj, we put something into the plan, whether or not that is sort of March, April time. We will, of course, advise members and look at that informal scrutiny session. Nods all around, that's good. Raj, are we clear now on our forward plan from that point of view? So at that point, the great and best item is item number 7, close of meeting. So I'd like to say thank you to the members of the committee, thank you to our officers and our scrutiny officers, and equally importantly, thank you to Councillor Graham Cheatley for coming along, listening to our deliberations, and I promise I'll come along to the executive and you can listen to me as well in the future. So at that particular point, I'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight and for those people who may be watching online, and I duly close the meeting. Thank you.